I tend not to ask my kid that, but I tend also never to have asked like patients that. Like, so, you know, I think what we're getting at is we want, and I think this relates to resilience. Like resilience is our ability in my mind to tolerate the widest range of emotions as possible. Because like as humans, we're going to feel that whole range. So the more of them you've learned to tolerate, like the better off you'll be. And so that's what I want for my kids. I don't know if that has to explicitly come from naming, although I think that point is definitely true. The more things we can name, the more things we can understand. To me, just showing up for your kid in a way that's like with believing, maybe with boundaries, is probably the best way to help your kid tolerate the widest range of emotions, because they learn that every emotion like can be held in connection with someone else, right? Versus held in aloneness and is bad. So I guess that's the way I think through it.
Maybe we could talk about adolescents and teenagers specifically. Teenage years are wild. I always say that the single most traumatic aging event and the most rapid rate of aging that we ever experience is puberty. I mean, just fundamentally, brain circuits that were for one thing or that were dormant change and come alive in ways that the world forever will look different to us, feel different to us, and our self-perception changes, period. It's something that biologists still understand at the level of hormones and hypothalamic circuitry, but that has really not been matched to a psychological understanding and vice versa. So like nothing is quite like the music you listen to when you're a teenager. It brings you back. The memories you form, positive and negative, stamped down, boom, now and forever. The emotional salience can change, but those are wild years. What are some of the more critical needs of late adolescents and teens that, you know, are actionable? You know, and yeah, I mean, my teen years were crazy, but even if they're less crazy, they're always crazy.
Yes. So, and one of the reasons I think, at least in America, that adolescence is seen as such a huge shift, like my kid is out of control, they're always out, they're like always rejecting me, I actually don't think is unrelated to the behavioral control approaches that are inherent in American parenting. Because like you referred to, your kid becomes 14 and they kind of realize like, wait, like I'm bigger than one of my parents. Like I literally don't care about their sticker charts anymore. And we might have missed 14 years of building a relationship. And so what that kid's adolescence is going to look like is markedly different than if for those past 14 years you weren't giving in to everything. No, but you were leading in a sturdier, more connected way. So I really think this whole idea that American adolescents like reject everything, I actually think not all of it, a part of it is completely developmentally normal, but a big part of it relates to this tradition of behavioral control that kids cannot reject until they're at the age that they kind of could survive on their own, which is adolescence. So I think that's really important. The things I would tell parents to really keep in mind that are critical. Number one is related to that. Like a teen's job is to separate and to start to form their own identity. And I think there's a couple things about that parents need to know. Number one, like I don't think we prepare parents enough for the true sense of loss they feel when their kids are adolescents. Because that's very real. Like you've just spent all these years and like you've driven them to every soccer and they kind of talk to you in the back seat and maybe you have family movie nights and then all of a sudden they don't want any of that. And it's just so important for parents to know like I'm going to feel sad. I'm going to feel lost. And if we don't know to expect it, we often kind of infuse that into a lot of anger toward our kid. And so I just think that's normal and we should talk about that more. And parents of adolescents need to be talking about that with each other. Of course you miss that. That's totally normal. Number two, related to that separation. If you think about identity formation, like here's a kid and us and we're kind of close and they now are at the stage where developmentally their job at that stage is to figure out who they are. They have to overcorrect. Like you have to kind of overcorrect in the amount of space you take because it's really the only way you can figure out like, wait, maybe I do want to take parts of that. That part's okay. And so I think that's like a powerful image to think about. Like they are moving far away. That distance they take from you is not their final point. They will move closer. Now, going back to loss, not as close as they used to be. And that is different, but this is their way of trying to figure out who they are. Then the last thing I'd say that kind of relates to that image is like, even as they move away, I think parents massively underestimate how much they still need us there making efforts to connect. And I always think like the difference between like an explorer and a nomad is whether or not you have a home base. And like if our teens feel like nomads, it's not a good situation. They're explorers. They try a million different things, but like they really do need us. They need to know that they have a home. And I'll never forget in my private practice, I used to work with teens not that long ago, just the teens, sometimes the parents too. And this teen came to me, and this was extreme. She'd been really in a bad place with her parents, like intense conflict. And they got in this huge fight, and she was really, really upset. And she was describing this to me. She's like, and then I was like, get out of my room. Get out. I hate you. Get out. You know, and I was just like sitting there listening. And then she's like, I pushed him out and I slammed the door. And just a couple minutes later, open the door. My heart's racing. Can you believe they weren't there? Can you believe they weren't there? And to me, it was just this like, and again, it's not about being a punching bag. But I, like, her seeming anger and her, like, intense pain were so close together in her own story that it's just over and over the same thing. Like, they're going to reject you. They're going to say, get out of my room. And yes, it sucks, but they want you to slip a note under their door. After you've taken a couple minutes, it says, that was really tough. Her like, wow, that got out of control. You're a good kid and I love you. And I want to just tell parents of teens, you're going to do that. There's going to be a pause and then you will hear them rip up the note. You will. And like, I swear to any parent that still resonated. And your kid is again trying to figure out, how do I stay close with my parents and I'm figuring out my own who I am. So like they rip up the note because like they almost like have to do it to like take in how much they're still desperate for those bids for connection.
Sounds a lot like the dynamics of adult relationships, although hopefully with a little bit less dramatic accentuation.
Yeah.
But you know, even if it does, I mean, it's like these circuits that are laid down in childhood, early childhood, they persist, right? I mean, I think if anything has become clear to me in understanding brain development and brain function, it's that, you know, we don't discard circuitry for attachment and go, oh, you know, that was for mom and this one was for dad and that one was for the dog. And then the romantic relationship is different. We repurpose the circuits. Mm-hmm. Hence all the beautiful work on childhood attachment that's now being translated to adult attachment. I mean, I realize there's nuance to it, but, you know, I was reflecting a bit on this, again, incredibly potent phrase or mention of explorers versus nomads, of having a home base, and thinking about these psychology experiments where children are observed in the presence of their caretakers. Sometimes the strange situation task where kids are separated from their moms, and the mom and child, typically mom. Nowadays, it's also been done with other caretakers and dads reunite. But one doesn't even have to know about those experiments. All you have to do is go to a park or be out in public and see a little toddler venturing away from parent. And then what do they do every once in a while? They look back. They're just trying to check to make sure they're there. Even the kids that are like taking off on the tricycle like crazy will eventually stop and look back. It's like this fundamental circuit where looking back, you know, and how far they feel they can go is in direct relationship to presumably the number of times that
they recharged,
that they recharged and were able to see that that verification that the parent was still there. I think this notion of explorers versus nomads, and being an explorer obviously being a good thing, a healthy thing, within reason, and nomads just feeling adrift, untethered.
Yes.
You know, one of the scariest words, at least to me, in the English language. So the note under the door.
Yeah.
It included the words "I love you." Mm-hmm. I don't want to get too detailed here, but those words sometimes are never spoken in a home, sadly. Sometimes are spoken so often and under so many circumstances that one wonders, like, do they lose their potency?
Yeah.
But I noticed that in that note, it finished, I love you. It's sort of like stating at the end of the day, no matter what you say, probably even what you do.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been in the presence of parents of kids that were criminals that did horrible things. They still love their kids. So reminding kids that under any and all circumstances.
Yeah, and again, and I think what's so critical because our brain collapses is that doesn't mean you think their behavior is okay. And I get the fear. Like, I would never want to send my kid the message that it's okay to, quote, do certain things, right? Like that it's okay to just scream at your parents. Of course, it's not okay. It's just, I think we miss, like, that happened. Like, that happened already. Like, if I dropped my phone and it broke and I was trying to understand why it broke, trying to understand that doesn't mean it's okay that I dropped it. Like, it just dropped. Like, it already happened. Now what? You know? And yeah, our kids need to know, they need to know that they're loved. And that, again, there's kind of like in that message, I think, like, I still see you're a good kid under that moment. And I actually think it's a powerful strategy for every parent to kind of conjure up a good kid image. Like, what is it? Was that last time we were playing this game and it was just so fun? Or is it a memory of my kid when they were 3? And, like, I don't know, they did this really cute thing. And it kind of, like, really crystallizes that. And, like, even under, you know, this bad behavior, that kid's still there. And the kids who behave the worst are in the deepest pain. I mean, the adults too. And that's not to say it's okay. But if, again, we're talking about relationships we want to be in. Like, if you're in a relationship with your teen, it's not one you're like, this is toxic. Like, this is my kid. I'm going to be in a relationship with them. So, you know, remembering that they're in pain. Teens are in a lot of pain. They're exploring a new world. Frankly, right now, like, teens have worlds. We don't understand it. That's so helpful for parents to approach your teen just as a tangible tool and say, you know, there's so many things in your world that I don't understand. And frankly, probably I might, like, criticize or judge. Like, can you take out your phone? This, you know, whatever it is, this app you're on, this video game, like, can we just even time box this 5 minutes? Like, I just want to end this conversation saying I understand it better. Like, I promise you that's probably going to do more for your relationship with your kid than anything else. Because yes, they do, and they might reject you. And if you do, again, don't take the bait, but ask again next week. Like, again, they need us to return.
Yeah, one thing's for sure, none of us, except those that are teens, know what it's like to be a teenager in 2024. Just like they didn't know what it was like to be a teenager for me in the late 80s, early 90s.
Right.
How could they?
Right.
So what are your thoughts on, like, family meetings? Like, once a week we sit down, we check in. You know, I hear that people do this, may participate in these before. Do you feel like those can be useful, or is it more window dressing?
I mean, I guess it depends what's happening in there. I mean, the idea of, like, hey, there's a lot going on in our life and we have a ritual of coming together and talking things through, working through problems. Like, if that's what it is, that's a beautiful thing. Like, I hear that. My first thought is I should do that, you know? But you're right. Like, life gets messy. So, but if it's done in a way where it feels we end and everyone feels a little bit more understood and a little bit more purpose and, you know, making things move forward in a positive direction, that's amazing. I think family meetings, it's funny, the way I think about them often, which is just different, is it's actually a great strategy, especially when your kids are older and there's, like, somewhat of an ongoing conflict. So maybe there's, like, an ongoing conflict about how much video game time or, you know, how much, you know, how late they can stay out. And to say to a kid, and again, this just comes from, again, so important for teens, we have to approach our kid like we're on the same team. I always say, me and my kid against a problem, not me against my kid where they are the problem. Like, and so to say, hey, you've been late, you know, or we have to figure out your curfew. And, like, look, you're a smart kid. You're a good kid. My number one job is to keep you safe. But you're old now. And if I just tell you a time, it's the same thing that happened last year. We're going to get in fights all year. Why don't we sit down and we'll do what I do at my office. There's 2 people. They each have ideas. I'm going to bring a pad of paper, and that's actually super important. And I'm going to write down all of your ideas and my ideas. And then we're just going to kind of go through and cross out the ones that, you know, feel completely unreasonable. And I have a feeling when we do that, we're going to come to a good place. So again, you can see there's that, like, hope I'm giving. Like, I hold the positive outcome, same team. I'm giving my kid credit in advance. This is actually, like, really it's usually the opposite of what teens feel, which is just my parents don't even listen to me or care and think they have all the answers.
I've heard this notion of, you know, couple parents come first and kids come second. And some people are probably like, what? You know, well, clearly never parented. Well, no, actually, it's an interesting idea, perhaps not correct or incorrect, but maybe dynamic across time, where the real question is, if kids know that they are running the family in terms of what they do or their inability to not be attended to, et cetera, is driving the whole relationship that the parents are in.
Yeah.
Versus, recognizing, and here I'm imagining two-parent home, but we could talk about divorced or people with significant others or single-parent homes. I've been in all of those. You got to wonder, are kids really paying attention to how much they are being prioritized to the point where if they observe their parents tending to their own needs that they feel deprivation, or does it make them feel safer? Like, hey, mom and or dad are taking care of themselves and can show up better.
Yes, I think that is critically important. And it kind of goes again to boundaries, of a parent. My relationship with my kid is so important. And I'm not going to let that take over me. That is not all of me. I am not only a caregiver to my kid. I would stand by that all day long. Is that an important part of me? And it's still a part of me. And I think this is really important to own as a parent. Because again, we tend to get we get apologists for it, or we look for our kids' permission. We'll say, look, I need to go out with dad without you, okay? We have a relationship too. And again, there's that job confusion. And my kid feels that. And again, it's that kind of giving them too much power. I've said this to my kids a lot. So they'll say, why do you go out with dad without me? I'll say, it's a great question. First of all, dad and I were married before we had kids. Our relationship is really important to us. And we love being with you. And being with you is different than just being the two of us. And that really, really matters to us. And so you don't have to be happy about it. And let's say I have a babysitter I know they're safe with. You can cry when I leave, and the babysitter will hold you, and we're going to go out to dinner, and we're going to come back, and, I'll see you in the morning. Yeah, I think that is so important. I actually think this is another topic. This topic of rage in parenthood is a big topic. The way, why do I get to these moments of rage so often? That my screaming is not just screaming at my kids, it's really rageful. And I think the parents often who are the most vulnerable to that are the ones where they're not meeting any of their non-caregiving needs. Which makes sense that a part of them is screaming out. What about me? I used to go to dance class. I used to see friends. I used to go out with my partner and talk about things other than, our kids. And so again, if I think kids need a sturdy leader, right? More than anything else. And sturdiness is not allowing yourself to be taken over by any one thing, including your relationship with your kid.
Is it truly better for there to be two sturdy leaders than one sturdy leader? I realize this is a controversial question.
Yeah. I know there's research to back this up, that having one kind of sturdy leader in your life is massively protective. I really believe that. And so when parents will say, my partner isn't, I'm like, we have research, this is true. Is two better than one? I don't know the research, probably, I don't know, But what I think is important in there too is what's not great for kids is having all the caregivers be some perfectly attuned caregiver, right? That actually does not set up your kid for life at all, right? Because I don't know anyone who thinks the partner I'm going to be with one day is going to be perfectly attuned to all my needs. Let me go find that person. So, you have one sturdy leader, you have two, but being sturdy, part of that is you're gonna rupture. You're gonna mess up, you're gonna hopefully repair, after. But sturdiness, I just want to make clear, is so not the same as perfection. Perfection is creepy. It's not a thing. No one needs that.
I love that. It's the first time I've laughed out loud on this podcast about a statement like that. The notion of perfection is kind of creepy. But sturdiness is anything but creepy. It's just such a beautiful word for all the right reasons. What about behavioral examples in parents? So for instance, if children observe parents being affectionate to one another in appropriate ways, right? Attending to one another in boundaried but empathically attuned ways. Do you think that projects forward into their notion of what adult relationships are like and should be like? Conversely, if parents are yelling at one another, do you think that projects forward into it's okay to yell in adult relationships.
Yeah, I mean, I think kids they're expert noticers. They notice everything, right? It's part of how they've learned to survive as such helpless, humans. So they definitely notice. They definitely act like sponges. So yes, if you're, kind of privileged enough in that way to grow up in a home where you have parents who, in general, are fairly affectionate, they take responsibility for their stuff, they communicate in a healthy way, I think that is like a true privilege you go into adulthood with. Yes. The other extreme, right? You grow up with parents who, they yell, or they can even yell in scary voices. Again, what I think is really important is the witnessing of that isn't going to be as impactful to a kid as the witnessing of it and nobody naming it and talking to them about it. So this is why so often kids will be in difficult stages, intense tantrums, major issues at school, and someone's like, what do I do? What do I do with this? Well, I gave you all the strategies in the world, but if that is just your kid's way of kind of manifesting all of their struggles with this huge marital conflict that's happening, it's not going to work. So it's all part of the same system. And so saying to your kid after you fight with your partner, hey, I think you heard Daddy and I screaming. And I'm sure that felt scary, because it does feel scary because they know you're their base. So if their base is of a house is feels like an earthquake, it feels scary. Another line I like is you were right to notice that. We were using loud voices. Again, I think that's massively confidence, building. Maybe what was that like for you? Or if you have a little kid, just that's enough. And they might look at you and say can I have my snack now? But it's still really sunk in. So if there is a lot of conflict, again, I think it's really important we talk about that with our kids and don't leave them alone.
What about teens that are really wayward? And this could be behavioral outbursts. There's also the whole underside of this thing where it's also about withdrawal.
Yes.
The kids are withdrawn. I mean, we were talking about outbursts and yelling. There's also the example in parents or the instances in kids that they're just really withdrawn.
Yes.
They're just disengaged.
Depressed,
maybe even dissociative, who knows, but not good.
Yep.
And this can show up on one end as violence, on the other end as isolation. It can show up as eating disorders. It can show up as all sorts of things. Intervention before age 18 is quote unquote easier in the sense that one has legal control. But oftentimes it's hard for parents to know how bad is this?
Yeah.
And I did an entire episode about cannabis, and I spoke to some of the medical benefits of cannabis for adults who are non-addicts, but I also talked a lot about some of the risks. But let's take an example that I think is pretty common. Kids 15, 16 starts smoking some THC with their friends, and you go, okay, well, everyone does that. Quote unquote, not as bad as alcohol, which I think is a lame argument. This is lame. It doesn't make any sense. Yeah, you're getting hit by car isn't as bad as getting hit by a train, but okay. But the point is, most all parents are okay, clearly they're self-medicating, they think they can't stop them, but you can stop them. At what point do you then take, you put them into a residential treatment program if you could even afford that? I mean, it's really tough for people to know how much to intervene in what is clearly not good behavior and then sometimes can be bad behavior. And yet the kids are using it to self-medicate. And there's a peer system that sometimes reinforces that.
Yes.
I mean, this is a huge landscape.
Yeah.
Maybe we have you back to talk just about this, but maybe we can presage that discussion. But by what do you tell people in your practice? Get in there now, pull the emergency cord and get this handled? Or do you say, listen, you just got to work with the system? And it's a tough problem I'm throwing at you here, but
I think the first thing is how do I as a parent kind of even assess is this normal? Is it not normal? Is it a problem? Is it not? So I think there's a couple things we could think about there. Number one, just seeing impact on overall functioning is always a one barometer, right? So, okay, can my child perform the kind of tasks of their developmental stage? Okay, so this is not the only thing, but are they still going to school? Wow, I noticed since they're smoking a lot of weeds, their grades went from B's to D's. Okay, they don't care about school anymore. They used to actually go out with friends. Now, unless they're with this one crew where they smoke in the park, they're not even seeing these kids they used to be friends with. They don't want to go to family functions anymore. They used to play soccer. If I'm answering this, I'd be wow, I'm not really talking just about a marijuana problem. I'm talking about my kid not engaging in kind of like the developmental tasks. That I would say is just like it's time to seek additional support, right? Another sign is just kind of how limited their world has become because of this, right? So again, is this kind of taken over everything they do? My kid is depressed, let's say, or and all of a sudden their world has gotten really, really small. And it's not just that that's the way they've always lived. Like there's a big change. The amount of conflict in the home. Again, like, is there conflict when you have teens? Of course there is. But like, wow, like, is it really hard to talk to my teen for more than 4 minutes? Walking on eggshells to me is also a sign that we need additional help. Am I scared to intervene in a way that would actually be in line with my values? That's not a good sign, right? Then the other thing I just want to make sure everyone knows is, to me, like, seeking additional help is a sign of every single thing that's right with the family. And I think we think it's a sign of something that's wrong. And it's like also a sign of what's right to in terms of messaging that to your kid. Again, I think about a kid who I used to see in my practice. She was probably 16 when she came to me. She was cutting. Serious, right? A lot, right? And I remember saying, just intake, hey, how long have you been doing this? She was 2 years. I go, oh, like, did you see another therapist before you saw me? She's like, no. She was like very like kind of quippy and quick. And I was just like, why? And she's like, well, I told my parents that if they took me to a therapist, I would go and I would just waste all their money. I'd be quiet. And then when they left me there, I would just leave. And who's going to stop a 14-year-old from walking away? And they might as well save their money because they can't make me. Okay. And again, I just kind of sensed to stay quiet. And she seriously, one of the next things she said is, can you believe they let me make that decision? Literally said that.
Wow. Validates everything you said up until now.
And it is. This is where like I feel like I get my best ideas. Like, that's right. Like a 14-year-old can convince her parent that she won't go to therapy when she's cutting. Like that is not okay. And again, then we go to, okay, so I'm going to say to my kid, you are going. I'm like, no, there's so much between that. We're in these binary states. Your kid's feelings about therapy cannot dictate your boundary, right? But we can't just then come down harshly. And so I coach parents in this all the time. What do you say to a kid? I love you. Hear me. Like, I love you. We're in a tough stage. I see this problem. And I do think even when our kids get older, we can say this. My number one job is to keep you safe. It is not to keep you happy with me. Mm-hmm. And I actually love you so much that I'm willing to do things that make you unhappy with me. Mm-hmm. That is actually how much I care about you. And so I am going to be driving you. And if you want to like curse at me the whole time, I will sit in that waiting room. And you know what I'm going to do the next week? I'm going to tell you I love you. I'm going to do the same thing. And I think adults hearing that on some level, there's some internal truth of like, I probably needed that. Like that feels oddly good because there's like, I'm not messing around, but there's this way where as parents we've said like the way to show my kid I'm not messing around is to be mean to them. Like there was nothing mean about what I said. I think it was more loving than saying to a kid, okay, let me know when you want to go. That is not loving. And so I think like our teens sometimes in those moments, they need us to do our job and like be the pilot. Like it is this small amount of time where they're still a passenger. When they're 18, they are the pilot. And so we have this window.
There's nothing I want to probe more into that. I think you captured it beautifully. And it gets back to this issue of safety. Like yes. In letting them make their own decision when they're clearly in trouble. Like if anything could make a kid feel unsafe, a teen or younger or adult, it's that.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
It's like laying the passenger on the plane. Be like, hey, instead of rerouting, how about you just come up here and fly?
That's literally what it is. And they're like, I can't believe you believed my little protest. Now I'm in the cockpit. Like this, they don't want that. That's why their words, teens' words, it's not that we don't believe them. Like as you see, I'm big on believing. Their words often are a representation of their fears. All of us in our worst moments. Get out. Like, I feel like sometimes like that's their fear or like they're kind of talking to their emotion. They're so like, they're not really talking to you in that moment. They're so dysregulated and like just learning to like not take it so literally and be like, what am I really believing? My kid is in pain. They're cutting. My kid is in pain. They're smoking weed 30 times a day and don't go to class. Like I know that they need help. And again, any parent who can say that like to me is like the strongest parent. And that is such a sign of health.
I don't think I'd still be alive today if it wasn't for non-parent mentors and just examples in the world. These aren't always people that were like, hey, I'm going to take you under my wing and be your mentor. Actually, those are rarely the case. But people in my real life or in my, reading or, there wasn't YouTube back then. But sometimes now, I'm a huge fan, for instance, of these Jungian psychologist, James Hollis, who has these beautiful lectures on making a life. And I'm learning so much. Like I consider him a mentor. Sorry, James, you didn't have a choice. You're a mentor. But these people that we can internalize certain healthy aspects that our parents just apparently can't seem to arrange for themselves, and that we wish they had. But I think that we, as children of all ages, we want perfect parents. We don't get them. But it seems appropriate to me. I'd love your thoughts. It seems appropriate to me to have kind of a foraging for examples of where we can get certain things that we can internalize for ourselves so that we can benefit that maybe our parents just aren't interested in, capable of, or even alive to provide us anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that being everything to someone, I don't want my kids to ever say that about me. My mom was everything. She fulfilled my every need. Again, I do find that creepy whenever, I don't know. And just setting them up for so much relationship disappointment. My mom gave some things, and now that I also work a lot, it's funny with my kids. There is this mom. When kids have a sleepover at her house, I mean, it is the best sleepover experience. I see pictures, and I'm like, wow, that was so thoughtful. That was amazing. She's she puts together. She's creative. And me and my kids joke. They're like, yeah, Mom, you're bottom of the list and that stuff. And I am. And I know I'm toward the top of the list in other things. I don't want to be toward that. First of all, I don't want to hold myself to that standard. That's a great way to implode. So yeah, being able to say to my kid, oh, you guys want to have a sleepover? You'd rather go to her house? Because that's okay. That's not an indictment of me. And so maybe this is some, quote, mentor-like figure for someone who can put these details and make people feel really taken care of in that way. That's great. And I think, yes, giving your kid permission and encouragement, again, I think is such a gift to them later on. Yeah, our relationship with our kids becomes not only the foundation, their expectations for their relationship with other adults. I mean, I also think it's literally what they're attracted to. I think when they're attracted to someone later on, it's just the activation of that earliest attachment. And so if they can get activated around someone who seems to be pretty attuned and respectful and validating and boundaried, because they also have other things in their life and not everything, that's a privilege to say that's what I'm expecting. So I think those other relationships, and as a parent, to hear your kid say, my coach taught me this thing, and sometimes they say it in a catty way, so much better than what you said to do at lacrosse. Just to take a deep breath. And again, this is where you can say, I'm still a good parent, even outside this moment. I'm so glad you're talking to me about this. I believe you. Tell me more about this. Such a beautiful example for your kid.
So being able to validate and embrace the fact that there are other sources of healthy upbringing is not just perhaps, is clearly a good thing. Do I have that right?
I think that's right. And I think if that's hard for a parent, what I'd say is, it's a question without an exact answer, but where did I learn that I'm supposed to be everything to someone? And I think a lot of women, we learn that in our families of origin to be good girls, which really just means I have no wants and needs of my own, and I just kind of gaze out and see how I can do things for you, and I can be everything for you. And then we have kids, we don't realize we put that onto them, but like you said, those patterns travel with us. And I find it very relieving to be maybe if I don't, wow, it just gave me a good percentage of energy back. I can do so many other things now, It's empowering.
I love it. Something that it's an unpleasant topic just by as soon as people hear the word, but it's something that I think comes up on the child side, the teen side, and the parenting side, and in adult relationships of all kind, which is the dreaded entitlement.
Ooh, dirty word of parenting.
Entitlement. Maybe we could put some definition on entitlement and talk about when it's bad. Is it always bad? When it's neutral and when it's I don't know. Is it ever good? I don't know. Entitlement doesn't sound like it's ever good, but
yeah, there is a healthy entitlement, right? And I think that is kind of the entitlement to like, I'm allowed to want things and I'm allowed to, at moments in my life, even act on that to turn that want into a fulfillment of my want. I think that actually goes back to what we were just saying, like versus how can I please you? Like maybe I want to do something. So I think that healthy entitlement, that's a good thing. But when I hear parents say like, please, I just don't want an entitled kid, they're not talking about that, right? And they're talking about, and to me, this story from my practice is just the key thing that makes us parents cringe, was this family I was seeing in New York City, and they were very wealthy, and they had this 16-year-old son, and they were flying, I think, back from Hawaii or to Hawaii, and they were just getting ready to board, and first class was boarding, and the sun goes up, and they're like, oh, so we were not like in first class, we have to wait. And he had basically a full tantrum in the airport, like every parent's worst nightmare, literally. And they came to me afterwards being like, how did we get here? Right? Now, this is a family. In general, it's true. They flew first class. They had private planes, had a lot of, money. But entitlement to me doesn't always have to be about money. I'm going to give you my definition of entitlement. I think it's very different. But to me, the definition, like boundaries, is useful because it gives you a pathway of what to do. I think entitlement is the fear of frustration.
Beautiful.
Because if we go back, okay, that thing didn't start at 16. And if we started, I started kind of collecting stories and, right, this is a kid who they had a driver. There's nothing wrong with having a driver. But I'm just thinking about like waiting for a subway. It's frustrating. You just missed the subway. We're going to be late. Like, no, right? This was a kid who didn't make, as I get older, I remember like didn't make the soccer team. Don't worry. We have someone who's going to take you to the nearby town in New Jersey and get on that soccer team, right? And I think about what this kid started to learn about being frustrated. And it was kind of like frustration comes up, and what gets layered next to it is someone else bringing you an exit. Frustration, exit from frustration. Maybe even exit to success, right? And then I started to think like, well, what would it be like if there was 16 years of kind of, again, because this doesn't happen, of that pattern and that circuit reinforcing? Because what you're really learning as a kid, I'm frustrated, and that's very overwhelming for me. But like the adults around me must be scared of my frustration because they won't let me sit in it. They won't let me feel it. They will actually kind of run in circles to not have me feel. So I actually encode my frustration next to fear. Now I'm 16 and I'm expecting first class and I get, lowly coach, It's not, people are like, oh, what a spoiled kid. Like I feel like this kid was like insanely vulnerable in that moment. This kid was like, I'm frustrated and what I expect to happen and what I know to happen isn't here. And so it is explosive. It appears as entitlement on the surface, but it is a deep intolerance and almost fear of frustration, which is in your body. So you're terrified of a feeling that is living in your body. And it looks demanding because it kind of is desperate. Like, you can't let this happen.
Wow. Fear of frustration as the definition of entitlement lands like square in the bullseye for me. And yet, yes, I think we all default to the kind of stereotypical example of the ultra wealthy family kid. There was that movie, The Toy, in the 80s. It was a really dreadful concept, actually. A kid that was just given everything and then wanted a person. I mean, it was really like, talk about foul. I mean, it's just, just bad at every level. And then they tried to, create this narrative where then, there's a deeper understanding about humans and stuff that evolves from it. But the starting point was, and I've observed this in certainly not my family, but other families where kids are given everything they want. It never feels like enough. Big surprise, dopamine is a real thing. The circuits recalibrate to a higher threshold. They want more and more and more. It's like that movie Wall Street. What's your number? More. Okay. All right. Nothing wrong with wanting things, but without a ceiling on any of that, and without a ceiling on pleasure or bounds on experience, it crushes everybody. That's also what that movie was about. It just crushes people. Yeah. So to build that into a child's neurology just seems like the worst possible thing. Because it's not about the world being a place of immense possibility. It's about the world being a place of like snakes and broken glass everywhere except this narrow knife edge path that you follow that is all about infinite resources.
And ease. That's right. And when I think it's fear is because if you're in fear, you're in like a threat state, which is why when kids are in that state or adults, it seems like nasty, like, and it's mean when you're, and there's this like narrowing of your eyes, right? So I think that's really, what's happening. And it's not always tied to money, but the truth is, and like money can easily buy a kid's way out of frustration. And by the way, it buys the parent out of having to tolerate their frustration while the kid is frustrated. And so it's tricky. I think I've now talked to a bunch of parents who grew up in a very different way, were very successful. And I get it. They're like, I feel like I literally have earned the right to have certain parts of my life be a lot easier, right? And like, how do I raise a kid who isn't entitled, right? And it is a conundrum, right? Like I don't think we raise our kids in a candy store, it's hard to expect them to appreciate candy, right? And so like, how do we balance that gratitude, the entitlement? And I do think though that idea is like, we just have to, and sometimes like other people hearing this would be like, yeah, like my life is frustrating all the time. And some people's are, right? They won't end up with entitlement. But for other families, they almost have to be like, I have to like dose it. I have to make sure my kids literally have experiences, and I probably have to go through it too, where we are almost like purposefully making sure they get enough of that, so they can build different circuits.
Yeah, so much to unpack there. I think it's clear that some of this is tied to financial means. I think it's a pretty scary thing when someone looks out on the landscape of the world as infinite possibility without any frustration. As we talked about earlier, the ability to lean into hard things as a skill that can extend to other things is so valuable. I mean, do you think that some of the smaller practices that any kid, any parent, any family, regardless of means, can lean into can really help there? Like some people say grace or a prayer before a meal. Others simply express gratitude. But, stopping and thinking about, being breathing, being ambulatory, being any number of good things that allow us agency in life, about to eat food. I mean, those moments I know that our nervous system reflects on those.
Yeah.
How could they not? And just recognizing that at least something went into the creation of the meal.
I think for like the entitlement stuff and the frustration, like there's all these small moments that we can start to make a difference. And I think it's saying to yourself, just because I can doesn't mean I will. So like my kid's young and I pick them up from a play date. And let's say I have a babysitter at home or my husband at home. And I'm like, I have to go to a store on some errands. My kid's like, can you drop me off first? Maybe I'm like, you know what? Like, no. Like, you're going to come with me on, I'm not going to say it this way, but on boring errands, because you just have to tolerate that, like, sometimes you have to do things you don't want to do. And, like, you're not going to learn that by me telling you that. You're going to learn that by experiencing that. Something with my kids, the other day, we were at an airport, and, like, there were, in the airport, like, it kind of winds around, like, to get, and there was, like, no one there. So they started to, like, duck under all the, like, things. And it just made me think, like, as a small moment, like, entitlement also was like the rules don't apply to me in some ways. I was like, and I just remember like, you guys when we're in airports.
Oh, the lines leading up to security.
Yeah,
where you
and you can duck and
sometimes
you like mess them up. And it wasn't like forever, but I was like, you guys, like these things, someone put these here for a reason, and we're just gonna. It's like these things don't have to be small. It's a small amount of frustration, but it's just like I don't always get to duck the line. Sometimes I have to like walk a little longer. Or I remember my kid saying, and I'm not immune to this. Like I am in a financial position where I have someone come sometimes help me be my housekeeper, right? And she'll fold the laundry. And I remember on a Sunday, my son said to me when he was younger, like, why do we have to fold the laundry? Kind of like, I don't think he said it, but he was kind of like, don't we have someone, who could do that? And I remember being like, this is a moment where I could be like, we're going to fold the laundry on Sundays. You know who loves folding laundry? Maybe some people like, I don't love undoing the dishwasher. It is inherently not that enjoyable. But like, and it's so frustrating. It's just like not great. And like, I know I need to make my kids do that. Like they just have to go through that mundane thing. And so I think there's all of these moments, taking your kid with you on errands, doing the laundry, right? Before you say to your kid, let's go to try out on another soccer team. Just like, oh, you didn't make the team. Maybe let it go 2 days. That's at least 2 more days of feeling upset and frustrated, right? They don't have to be these big grand things, but all of those little moments can add up in a really positive way.
What's your stance on household chores, and should kids be paid for household chores?
Yes, I have a whole guide to chores and allowance. And I actually, I think there's a lot of thought, like, should they be separate? I don't know. I think it could be done either way. But to me, the question for a parent is like, what is the point for me? Like, what is my goal for chores? What is my goal for allowance, right? And I think that has to then structure how we do it. So my guess is for chores, part of it is I want my kid to, number one, maybe like help around the house. I want them to have that purpose. Also, like I know for me for chores, like sometimes your life involves doing boring things. That is just true. And like I want my kids to know that, which means they have to experience it. That's one of the reasons we do chores. So for me, if that's one of the reasons, I'm not going to pay my kid. Because for me, in my family, what I think my kids need to get out of it is just like knowing that sometimes you do boring things as part of being a good human. For someone else, that might be totally different. So I think we just ask ourselves as parents, like, what am I trying to accomplish? And then let me structure it around that.
Across the course of today's discussion, I've been feeling both immense gratitude and relief for certain quote-unquote hardships that I experienced and things that my parents made me do or ways that they were negligent and I was forced to figure things out. Also, some things where I was like, wish they had done this. I think everyone listening to this will feel that way. And if you're lucky enough to still be in the parenting child rearing or being a child process, then there's still time. So I guess there's always still time. In my introduction to this episode, I touched on a few of these, but tell us what you're doing these days to help parents and kids, indirectly or directly, to be more effective in their relationships. And I know you've written about this in books, and you have a wonderful social media account on Instagram and elsewhere. I follow it. And there's so much learning there. But, how are you translating this knowledge into actionable programs?
Yeah, that is that is what gets me out of bed every morning, is translating. I always say deep thoughts, actionable, practical, can do it today strategies.
Yes.
That's the only way I can work. I'm like, tell me what to do to put that idea into action.
Love it.
So, a couple years ago, one of the things that really struck me was just like, I really did feel angry. Like, this is so messed up. We parents have the hardest job, and it's the one that impacts the world the most. And I don't think any of us think the world is in like a great place right now, right?
No, it's not.
Right. And I remember someone coming up to me and saying, parenting is also the only job you care about on your deathbed. And I think that's probably true if you have kids. So like, for every reason, this should be the place that that we invest the most, or that the system is like set up to help us, right? And most people I know, they don't want to parent the exact same way as they were parented, maybe take parts. And that is the way we'll parent. It's just kind of the language we use. And learning a new language, we know, is totally possible. Like Duolingo has showed us that. You can learn a new language. It's hard. Sometimes you revert to your language of origin, especially in stressful moments, same thing in parenting, and then you go back. And so I remember saying to some people around me, like, I want to create that like kind of Duolingo for parents. It is learning a new language, and we should have a product